It is 11 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Welcome to Life After Git Push. Just to kind of set the stage for what we actually mean by Life After Git Push, we've been talking in this community for a little while now about infrastructure as code, whether that's your environment as code in Terraform and ARM and all sorts of other fun stuff like that. Or we talk about infrastructure as code with Chef or desired state configuration or Ansible, which was just going on a little earlier today. When we talk about that stuff, there's almost always the conversation about, oh, let's get this into source control and get it into a CI pipeline, and then we commit it and push it up, and everything's fine, right? All our work is done. We can go to the bar, have a couple, and enjoy the rest of our lives. Well, that's not exactly true, right? There's still things that we have to tackle. There's still things that come up. Infrastructure as code is a wonderful thing, and it's been wonderful for my career, but it is not a panacea. It doesn't fix all the problems. So, unfortunately, we do Git Push, and everything's good, right? We got our little OctoCat going there. And in a few moments, we're going to go and take a look at a really, really basic CI/CD pipeline that deploys an ARM template and some applications. But then we're going to mess with it a little bit. And I would like to kind of treat this session as kind of a little bit of group therapy, a little bit of group self-help, and I have a few things that we can do to muck with the environment a bit and some ideas on things that we do from an operational basis. But y'all are the experts in your environments. And so I want to hear about some of the challenges that you face in stepping away from getting into that RDP session or getting into that ad hoc administration and into some of these other topics that we're going to talk about. So we can address some of the challenges you're going to face, because chances are you're not the only one in the room facing that. So how much we get out of this session is going to depend in part on you. So I'm going to share the load. So it is not all my fault if you don't like it. Look around. Everybody here is now part of this presentation. So let's quickly take a look at the environment that we're starting with. Really, a connection error already? All right, while that's refreshing, I've got a little Azure DevOps project, appropriately named PowerShell Summit. And in this project, there's a couple of repositories. And the view for those repositories is, let's, yeah. 1.1.1.1, okay. See, I told you guys you're going to be part of this presentation. You are already delivering beyond expectations. Y'all deserve a raise. Okay, let's try this again. All right, reset. We are back to our Azure DevOps environment. And there are several, there's a front-end service, there's an inventory service, a product service, and a repository for our web application infrastructure. Then we have a few build pipelines, one for each of those repositories, and then some releases that match those things as well. Now, these are extremely stripped down. In the web application infrastructure, there's a basic ARM template that's parameterized so that we can deploy to multiple environments. And what it ends up getting us is this Tailwind Traders application. And this application consists of 3 different app services. There is a product service, which pulls out all the products that, like our rustic soft keyboard, which has got a very funky look to it. The inventory service, which allows us to control how many we have in inventory. And then there's the front end app itself, which is just a JavaScript front end, React front end that goes out and queries those two back end services. So now, since I've got everything here, and in my ARM template, we deploy, I can show you here, we can take a look at the release. We deploy to a number of different environments, and as part of that deployment, now I'm illustrating here with Azure. These things, you can replicate these patterns that we're going to talk about today on any type of environment. But just to show you a little bit about what variability is going in here, we pass in some parameters for each environment that specify things like connection strings and host headers and that kind of thing that'll vary from environment. And so really everything should just be all good, right? No problems. It deploys, the site came up, everything works fine until, life happens. Maybe we've got an overeager admin or somebody who likes to go muck about and play with configuration settings live. And maybe they make a little change to our connection string, right? App settings never get changed live outside of your configuration management, right? Never happens. All right, wrong web app. So we are in our development environment, and we want the inventory service, because that's got a connection string to SQL Server. So go into our configuration. I can be my own bad actor, and we'll just make a little change, and we'll get rid of the username here. We'll change that to Fred. Every time Fred, it's always Fred. All right, we'll save our application settings, and things should be going haywire right about now. All the people who are trying to use it in our dev environment, things are just failing badly. So when we come into some challenges here, I could repush all my infrastructure. And if that setting is covered in my infrastructure as code, that might just go fix everything. Or there are going to be cases where we may not have that modeled in our infrastructure as code. Maybe that app setting is getting pulled from somewhere else. So maybe we have a bit of orchestration in front. And there's other settings that we can consider outside of connection strings, right? This could be a configuration file that needs to get updated somewhere. This could be a service that needs to get restarted. We've got a number of other scenarios that, maybe we need to rebuild the environment somewhere else. There are a number of other scenarios, and I'm going to ask you in just a second for some of your ideas of things that might go wrong. And then we're going to go build a little bit of automation to help deal with that. But deal with it in a way that we separate ourselves from the environment, and so that when those changes are made, they're going to happen the same way every single time, right? And we're going to get a little bit of PowerShell, we'll get a little bit of Azure Functions, we'll get a little bit of logic apps. But again, all of these things can be replicated, all of these patterns can be replicated in other tools. So what other scenarios do you have to do in your operational life when you're managing infrastructure and when you're managing services? And I will sit here quietly until somebody. Security. What about security? All right. So we have to manage security. Maybe updating ACLs or groups, right? Managing. Pardon? Yes, getting Fred's rights out of there, right? Fred should not be able to go and change himself, change it so he has access to that connection string. What else? We got security, network, right? Maybe we need to add more nodes to the load balancer, or redirect some load off, or things like that. We've got that as an option. Maybe we need to do some complex stuff when there's notification. Maybe we need to notify when some change, or log when some changes are made, right? That did not get logged anywhere when Fred went and made that change. So one of the techniques, one of the ways that we can go about doing that type of work is putting together custom workflows. And there's a lot of different workflow tools out there. I'm going to use Azure Logic Apps today. So I've got a Logic app that I've started, and I've already given it a little bit of work to do. So this Logic app is triggered by an HTTP endpoint. So I could tie it to a number of different orchestration tools, or I could tie it to a number of different things. And when it gets a request, it understands that we have a certain body of content coming in. And in this case, it's looking for an action, target, and a value in JSON. And then based on that action, because if we've given Logic Apps a JSON schema to take a look at, and it can infer a schema out of a payload. We'll see that as we update that schema in just a moment. We can have Logic Apps go and switch on this. Now I could build this all in an Azure function in PowerShell and have PowerShell iterate over it. But part of this is part of deciding the tool set we're going to use to deal with our orchestration is going to be, where do I want to spend my time building things versus what tools do I just want to take advantage of the orchestration capabilities, or their tie-ins and things like that. I'll pick on John because he mentioned on day one in his environment they're using an orchestration tool, right? Is there a reason why you're using an orchestration tool versus just building all that functionality yourself?
Mostly for troubleshooting. It's very easy to drill down into a workflow, and you can encapsulate different pieces of it, and after the fact, you can go look, okay, well, this failed. I can go look and visually see, okay, it failed on this exact step. I can make a change and then actually continue the orchestration from that point, and it will continue the process. That's one of the reasons.
So one of the reasons, just in case anyone didn't hear all of that, and for the recording, right, is around troubleshooting. The tool allows for better, more granular troubleshooting that he didn't have to go build, and he can pick up and resume after he makes a change. There are a lot of other reasons that we may look at adding in different tools or going and building it on our own. For me, I like Logic Apps because I do a lot of stuff in Azure. And it's got a nice set of integrations to things. I can tie it to GitHub. I can tie it to Teams. I can tie it to Slack. I can tie it to a bunch of other tools, Azure DevOps, whatever. And I get a bunch of integrations that I don't have to go write later. And then I can call PowerShell whenever I need to by calling an Azure function. So in this case, based on what the action is, if it's update connection string, I'm going to call an Azure function that will go and update the connection string for me for that particular site. Now, if it doesn't match, then I can just send back an error message saying, hey, that action that you specified, it doesn't exist yet. Now I can quickly and easily build these workflows inside of Logic Apps, and then I can focus the PowerShell that I write on being just the bit that I need to write. So we've got a little Logic app, or a little Azure Functions love going on here for PowerShell in our got too many resources in here. There we go. And I'm horrible at naming things. If you were looking through the names in that resource group there, there's a couple of things named Orchestrator. If I ever work with you, you should be the one naming things, not me. I'm not good at it. You saw my Azure DevOps organization was named after this event. I'm not very creative when it comes to naming things. I worked for Chef. I did not name any of the projects, or I worked for Chef a few years ago. I did not name any of the projects there. They were all much more interestingly named than things I would come up with. So I have a function to update that connection string. And then we wait. As that's coming up, I just have to write just enough code to do that connection string update, and then there's a little bit of boilerplate at the front and the back, the parameterization and the response that comes out. And I can focus on just this little bit. Right, there's like from line 9 down to about line 15 there encompasses the bits that I care about in managing this service, in getting the connection string changed. I just take the values in that I want from the body that's coming in, that's being passed in by logic apps. And I can ACL my function such that only my logic app can call it. So we take security into account here. And I can go ACL my resource group such that only my function and my CI/CD pipeline can make changes there. Right? I can keep Fred from going to that connection, to that application settings or the configuration for that and manually changing things, because I'm starting to put those, the capability to make those changes into tooling, right? When we're starting to do this type of thing in our environment, you're not going to get it all done all at once. You're not going to remove every single reason for a person to remotely connect to or directly manage a service all at once. But you can, bit by bit, move those capabilities into your orchestration tooling. So in this case, we've got one done, and we've started adding another service, because guess what? Sometimes when we update settings, we need to make sure that app gets restarted. And I could just stick a restart into each step, but maybe there's a condition where I don't need to restart and I don't want to restart because that's going to impact my service case, my use cases with my users. Wow, this is a little pokey today. So while that is, oh, there we go. While it's coming around, oh, no, it's, I didn't see the dots there. I was standing by them. So while that's coming back up, all right, there we go. So very similar. I basically could take this content and copy it over and I could make a number of different functions all tied here. And because I can assign an identity to this Azure function, I can give it rights to work with different things inside. I could give it rights to talk to Key Vault. I could give it rights to manage a resource group. And in this case, I've given it rights to manage my dev resource group. Because we've assigned, either you can have the system assign or you can control. So anyone familiar with group managed service accounts and managed service accounts in Active Directory? This is that idea, but in cloud, right? So we can take some of the rights away from folks that don't need to be manually twiddling with stuff and put it behind our orchestration. So if we look at our dev resource group, we can see that I've assigned contributor rights to the logic app, as well as to my CI/CD pipeline. Now here's where I could go in and start removing and more directly controlling and getting Fred away from this app. And don't be Fred. Now, once we have that framework in place and we start peeling back some of the tasks and things that we have for folks to do, and I can interact with that via a little bit of PowerShell and invoke REST method to go call the logic app. Let's actually do that. Let's fix our environment. So I've just got a little payload that I'm going to create. We're going to make it into JSON, and then we'll post it with invoke REST method up to the logic app. And we'll let that run. It's going to take a couple minutes. It'll go fix it, and we can go back and check. But then we can take a look at, and I actually did not prompt John before about asking why he was using an orchestration tool. But the example you gave is one of the reasons why I like using logic apps as an orchestration tool. See, we got an error here. What didn't I like? Oh, we'll go back. We'll troubleshoot that in just a bit, but we can take a look at for that logic app. Oh, this is functions. For the logic app, it gives us a history of runs and what happened in those things. So when we have something that fails, it's going to pull up the graphical look of our request, and we can see what things were at particular points in time. So if you want to build this workflow tool, keeping this kind of debugging in mind is definitely helpful. Otherwise, if you need this type of behavior, finding a tool that matches, right? We can see the values that were provided. We can say, hey, no dependent actions succeeded. So what happened? We can drill in and find what the errors were. For retries, we can see all sorts of fun stuff that goes on with these. So let's refresh. We might have a failed execution. Nope, we got a successful one. Then when we get a successful, we can see all of the things that went through to make our environment succeed, as well as paths that we didn't take. Now, we can leave that as an API, and we can call that from other tools. So if we have some sort of management dashboard, if we have some sort of tooling that we're already working out of, maybe we want to make a plugin to VS Code. Maybe we're using some other management tool. Is Power GUI still a thing? No, probably not. But back when I was working a few jobs ago, a number of jobs ago now, you used something like Power GUI, wire in a bunch of management packs so we had a UI. You can tie these type of things to other tools and to give the user interface and to surface the capabilities to the people that need them, so you don't have to be in the way to go run the thing. Right? One of the ideas here is we want to make sure that we're focusing on the work where we can provide the best value to our organizations. And one way that we can surface some of that is chat ops. Anyone familiar with chat ops? I think we see a little bit of little bit of enthusiasm coming back there. I think somebody in the room may have actually even written a little bit of a chatbot. So, chat ops is a wonderful way to surface this type of orchestration, and it's good for work on kind of a day-to-day basis, and it's good for work in other contexts as well, like incident response. So, with things like chat ops, right? And you can do Teams, you could do Slack, you could do IRC. The chat tool itself, again, doesn't matter. That's an implementation detail. Depends on what you have available in your environment. But it's a wonderful way to persist your automation and to surface that, especially as you're trying to train new people, get them up to speed. If you want to control access to data, and hey, we want people to be able to retrieve logs. We don't want everyone SSHing or IRMing or remote connecting over with Event Viewer and having a bunch of people all trying to retrieve logs from the same machine at the same time. If you're troubleshooting an incident, bring those logs back into chat, and then whoever wants to get them from there can get them. Stop taxing the server that's having a hard day, and bring that tooling off. You also then have a chance to see what other people are doing, so that you're not trying to retrieve logs from that server while someone else is trying to reboot it. That always leads to fun, right? So ChatOps provides a number of great opportunities. When we bring new people on board, they can start to see what other people are doing to execute against our systems, to change state, to resolve problems, right? It gives them a chance to build that context about those environments that's so important, but that you only learn by doing. And so they have a chance to do in front of other people that they're working with, so that they can get help. Hey, you know what? You know what's going to be a little more effective? Tweak your command next time, or try this chat command. That will work, right? So the other thing that ChatOps enables, right, is we start dumping back what people are doing. We get a nice audit log of when things were happening over time. When we respond to incidents, this is that's really important, because now you want to build a timeline of how things happened and what happened to resolve it. If you have not played with ChatOps and chatbots and stuff like that, there are some wonderfully easy getting started examples in Azure, but there's also wonderful tools like PoshBot out there that can wire into a bunch of different things. So who here is using something like ChatOps in their environment? Oh, wow, that's more than I expected. That's awesome. If you are not, for those who did not raise their hands, do you have some sort of chat tool in your environment, whether it's Teams, whether it's Slack, something else? If you have the ability to add integrations into that environment, as you start to add some of these orchestration capabilities and adding them into your chat channels is extremely powerful. I highly recommend it. Then I've been mentioning incidents a couple of times, right? So what happens when life starts to feel a little bit burny, a little bit hot around the edges, right? I've never worked in an environment where it felt like this. Now, I've worked in many different operational environments, and that felt more like normal than not. So one of the ways that we like to be able to kind of scale out our capability, especially when responding to incidents, when everything's burning down, right, is to take advantage of these type of orchestration tools, to take advantage of that centralized functionality. And we can take advantage of if we're building chatbots to help manage our environments, we can also use them to help deal with our outages. We can use them to do things like create dedicated channels for our incident response. If you have alerts dropping into your general chat channels, whether it's a channel for the ops people, whether it's a channel for just a specific group, it starts to mix with the regular conversation, and we start to lose track of what happened there. So using our automation capabilities, things like logic apps or something like that, to create a dedicated channel per incident and keep the conversation segmented there is a wonderful use of that type of tool. Retriggering deployments, retrieving logs and metrics, all that kind of stuff plays into this. And it becomes really easy. And this is where you start to see some of the power of those type of tools. So let's do a little bit of extension here. We've gotten our Azure function. It's got an identity. And we've added a restart step. And from there, we can add that restart into, oh, we're in the history there. Hop back over to the designer. Let's finish off this orchestration tool and maybe add another use case, just to kind of see how we can evolve this over time. So our case is update connection string, and I want to also add in my restart. So I can just pick one of the connectors. If you haven't explored Logic App connectors, grab a free trial and try it out. There's a lot of fun stuff there. Again, a lot of other orchestration tool is going to have, or they're going to have a lot of built-in connections and things. Since I'm doing a lot of Azure, this tends to work. We want to add our restart function. And we're just going to pass through. We get to fill in based on all the previous steps. We can take those same parameters and we can easily pass them down to the next thing. So we can add that in and then maybe add a response so that the reason we got the error before was there was actually no response from the service. We hadn't added it yet. So we're going to go here and we'll just take the body of our restart web app, our last action, and we can save it. And now we have a completed workflow for our update connection string setting. We can take a look and see if our app is still running. Have we broken anything yet? All right, our inventory service is back to working, so that change to our connection string did take. And even though we got an error back, it's because we did not have a response before. So now I can add stuff to my inventory service. I can take it away for those nice looking rustic soft keyboards. Licensed frozen shoes. You gotta love generated, like randomly generated names and things. They are $606, but they're licensed. So there's some branding to that. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. They're licensed from Frozen. There. That's awesome. That's great. All right, so we've looked at a couple of different orchestration scenarios, a couple of different options for how we can reach into our environment, how we can surface some of that. What are some of the scenarios that you think may not fit in to that? And what are some of the challenges that you're seeing and doing in your environments trying to scale some of your automation?
Looks like you didn't discover this had happened until you had your outage, right? So you weren't notified that Fred had updated the thing.
Yep.
So you had no cause to go look at it except that, presumably one of your customers got kicked off at you and, called support. So you have this whole loop that has gotten you to the point where you can then instantiate the cool tools to resolve it.
Yep.
It seemed like it would be appropriate to either observe the change when it happened or figure out what was the next state of the thing after that change happened and maybe let somebody know.
Right.
Or monitor the website's availability.
Yep, monitoring the website's availability. So maybe after our deployment, we check to see if things are up and running, right? So we could add steps into our, I mentioned I had a very bare bones deployment here. It's just a resource group deployment. We could add steps afterwards to validate that things are running. Then we can add monitoring to make sure that our, just like with, if you were in my talk yesterday, where we talked about adding in some service level indicators and objectives for our environments and making sure that they're up and running and working and that we could get alerts off of these environments. And actually, one of the, for example, in Azure, one of the things that you can do with alerts that are generated there is they call action groups. And action groups can do a bunch of things like emailing people, which we don't really love because emails don't wake people up at night usually. Sending a calling or sending an SMS message. But they can also trigger Logic Apps or Azure Functions. So you can have some sort of automated response. I could have one of the logic apps like we just built that goes and iterates over the settings and makes sure that they match the settings that we deployed with, right? And because ARM isn't like Chef or desired state configuration where it runs in the background constantly checking settings. It's a fire at this time and then I check things at that particular point in time. So there's not something there that's going and checking that environment continuously. So putting things in place to watch and then be able to respond. When we have those action groups, right? We go. Maybe we're going to go into alerts. Let's go. We need a App Insights resource. Manage action groups. So in manage action groups, we have the opportunity to create those action groups that can go and call and not only notify people or create a channel in our chat to talk about what's going on, but they can maybe make that assertion against the environment or re-trigger the ARM template deployment to validate that the environment is in place. We can make sure when we're doing infrastructure as code deployments that we're doing stuff in the complete deployment mode and not incremental, to make sure that all of the things that we care about in our environment are modeled there. That doesn't translate as well into some on-prem concepts, but if you're doing cloud deployments, making sure that the things that are in the environment are what was modeled in infrastructure as code can be very beneficial versus an incremental where we deploy it and it may add to the environment, but it's not going to remove things that weren't defined. That leads to a narrative where you can not necessarily have a complete model of what's actually in your resource groups and what's actually in your environment. The other thing we can do is start to pull some of these parameters out and put them into a key store, whether it's Key Vault or Console or etcd or Vault or a number of different tools where we can pull out some of those things. And in fact, in this environment, all of the settings are actually in Key Vault and they're mapped into the deployment process. So that when we need to update that setting, we have a source of truth that we can check against to make sure that things are right. And when we need to update it, we update it in one place, and all the other tools can pick up that setting. Other challenges. Those were really good. Come on, it's not even after lunch yet. That's next. Yes?
The challenge I have is everything we develop ends up on VM.
Yep.
Just getting them into PaaS services, these App Insights and trigger off that is just a challenge getting us in there.
So what's the challenge getting in there? Is it the tooling missing, or is it the comfort level, or?
Just working with development, they're in their own silo, and they're like, we need an IIS service, we have to have scheduled tasks, batch managers, and it's just really old school stuff putting out there. And they're like, the PaaS just doesn't give us the access we need, so we have to go IIS and log in and set up all this really old stuff. And you lose your visibility in a sense. It's not up in the air.
Yeah.
Reports from the host.
Yeah, that can definitely be a challenge, and you can start some of the ways that these, or one of the really popular and fun to say patterns for working with that is the strangler pattern, right? And normally we talk about that in breaking up monoliths, but you can also use this in breaking up objections, and to start, taking one of the things that's a problem, like let's say scheduled tasks, and putting it into some other task scheduling tool that you can scale out that's not tied to that particular machine. Again, logic apps, orchestrator, all these type of tools allow you to. What was the name of the one that you? PMG. Right. There's a number of different tools and possibilities which are not tied to that individual server that you can start pulling some of these tasks out and hey, look, let's try in our dev environment with moving that task into this. And just letting them build up some of that comfort over time, right? Drop App Insights not, in IIS. Start pulling your monitoring out into that. And you can start modeling that because you don't have to be in Azure or on App Service to use App Insights. Or you don't have to use App Insights. You could use something like Datadog, or you could use something, right? There's a number of other tools in the ecosystem that you can use to do these patterns. But the important part is to start adding them. And you don't have to wait till you can do all of the things to start doing some of the things. And so we can start looking at if we move into App Service, what are the things that we will lose access to that are fundamental to the service we're providing versus our proxies for information that we're deriving about the system. And this is kind of what we talked about in monitoring yesterday. Like percent CPU and disk queue length and memory pressure, those all give me cues about what's happening in the system. They don't actually tell me what's wrong. They give me clues, and I use my context that I've built to figure out what's wrong with the system. We fall back on some of the capabilities in our IaaS VMs the same way, right? We have task scheduler. Well, we've got a billion ways to run tasks. That's just the comfortable one, right? And because I know I can make it run, I know it's in the system context already on this system. Once we start pulling some of that stuff out and we start reducing that compliance, the need for that particular type of resource, now we have a little bit more leverage for moving into something where we don't have to manage such a heavyweight environment. Other questions, challenges? Okay. Yes?
We've got a lot of small clients
Mm-hmm.
that are probably still a little bit in the 90s.
Yep.
They're starting to take their first steps up into Azure environment. And they have some curiosity on, we want to try out a little bit of this DevOps stuff.
Yeah.
But they're not developing any applications in-house. They've got core services, they've got an FTP server, a couple print file servers. What's a reasonable area to start them up on something like that? Where they probably don't need a release pipeline for your DCs.
Or do they? Right? It may seem overkill until you have to do it again, right? And okay, so now you want to move in, you want to explore Azure, and where are they running stuff now? Is it on-premise, host, colo, or something like that, or actually in their environments, or? Okay, so, right, you want to go and start exploring cloud and the DevOpsy stuff, right? So creating that infrastructure as code model or some sort of scripted deployment, orchestrated deployment for that environment allows you to start testing those. And then, hey, you try Azure, maybe you don't like Azure. Maybe you move on to trying AWS or Google Compute, seeing which one fits your tooling and your model better, right? But once you've moved it into that infrastructure as code place, now all of a sudden I can start testing things a lot more easily. What's one of the biggest challenges that keeps us from moving to new versions of server, to new environments, to changing network layouts, to deploying the next version of the off-the-shelf software that we're going to have, is spinning up a test environment to actually test the thing. Writing automated tests is one thing. Just getting the test environment is often the challenge. And if we start moving towards infrastructure as code, building that test environment becomes much more simple, right? It becomes much more realistic and becomes much less of an impediment to moving into these new environments. So yeah, it may seem like, oh, we got a couple of DCs, maybe it's not worth doing infrastructure as code, but if we've only got a couple of DCs, maybe it's worth doing infrastructure as code because I can do a lot more, I can enable a lot more capability in our environment. Yes?
I have a comment on that. You're looking at a different worldview. You can look at writing as code, but you're actually creating documentation. A lot of environments I started in, nobody knows why or how anything is configured. So I'm spending days and months reverse engineering what was done before. With this methodology, you have a document, do you know what the environment is about? It's no longer a mystery. It becomes an open door. And when it breaks, you have something to look at. Yeah, they are on a CI/CD pipeline because rather than writing an application, you're writing your environment.
Yep. The comment was around not only are you automating the environment, but you're also creating documentation about the environment while you're doing it. And our environments have evolved so often, and documentation can get out of date, right? But when it's executable documentation of the environment, the thing that we run to actually stand the environment up, it's much more likely to be close to accurate and fresh.
Traditional documentation is out of date by definition.
Yeah. You know,
You got a poorly written infrastructure as code, though. That's kind of crappy documentation.
it is.
Well, it's accurate.
Yeah. So I mean, we can do all sorts of good things poorly, right? But we can also do bad things. If we do bad things well, is that better than good things poorly? Right. There's definitely trade-offs, and there is. So one of the big things that is a major hurdle to a lot of adopting a lot of these automation tools and processes is there's new stuff to learn, right? And we have to make the trade-off of, hey, do I want to? I'm a PowerShell person. I can automate my way through a ton of different stuff in PowerShell, but now I want to go do some CI/CD, and so I got to learn that, and I got to learn some source control, so I got to learn some Git, and I got to learn some testing, so I learned me some Pester. And now you're telling me I got to go learn Ansible or Terraform or Chef or something else. So I'm learning some Ruby, or I'm learning these other DSLs, right? There can be the perception of, hey, we're just piling on after piling on. And so doing these things in an incremental fashion it can be a very good thing. Like, hey, let's introduce source control in our environment first. Then let's introduce a CI/CD pipeline and just take the things that we're doing today, get them in source control, and deploy them out to a management server. Right? That's a great pattern. Then we can start adding things. We can start adding a little bit of testing. We can start playing with desired state configuration if that's where our strength and background lies. Now all of a sudden we hit a pain point. Oh, maybe I need to get me some Chef because I need to do notifications and I don't have that in desired state configuration. Or maybe I don't want an agent running on the box, so I'm going to do some Ansible and just do some direct orchestration. Right? There are a lot of other things that we're going to learn as we go and do these that are going to influence our future tool choices. So picking a starting place and adding in one tool, not necessarily going whole hog, or you start with an orchestration tool, get that one task wrapped up and start doing it that way. Then maybe wire that into chat and see how people like it. Then start adding the second thing and the third thing and the fourth thing, right? We're just chipping away at our technical debt. We're chipping away at the things that keep us from adopting good practices, that keep us from moving forward in our environments. And you can definitely do this if you're not building software internally. If you're only running off-the-shelf software, or you're running software that's built by contractors and given to you and you don't have any control over it, you still have the control over the environment that you have around it and how you operate it. I was talking to one of the SRE managers at Microsoft who is responsible for a lot of the build infrastructure inside of Microsoft. And one of the things that they're still responsible for is a service called Source Depot. It was the source control system that we used to manage all of the Windows code base, as well as a bunch of other stuff. And it's really, it's a very fragile thing, and we can't invest in making changes to that software, but we need to keep it around and running. And so they wrapped the thing in infrastructure as code. They figured out how to put it behind load balancers and things to a point where they can treat it like all the other new infrastructure, even though they can't make any changes to this thing. And you're going to hit limits. There are going to be some things that you're not going to be able to make changes to on it. But you can, the closer you can bring those more legacy or those systems that you cannot make changes to, whether they're commercial or in-house, to treating them like new services, to treating them in the fashion with infrastructure as code or managed with orchestration, managed using service discovery and things like that, figuring out ways to inject that in. Those are all wonderful things that we can do to help bring our environments forward, even if we don't have control over the applications. So with that, I'm a couple minutes over, so thank you all very much. I will be around the rest of the week if you have questions or want to chat.